Welcome to the Powerhouse Podcast. I am your host, Brian Arman, President and CEO of the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation. And I'm joined today by my co-host, Dr. Phil Yeske. Phil, how are you, sir?
Isn't that what Carol Burnett always did whenever she was on stage? You know,
give a little signal
ear to say hi to her
gosh.
mom or kids.
You're dating yourself, Phil. You're dating me, but no comment on Carol Burnett. I will say I've got an old-timey radio voice right now, though. I am like scratchy in the throat. I think it sounds pretty cool with my headset here and my microphone. What's been new with you?
Well, yeah. I mean, time ticking by here. We're having a nice run of weather, which is really nice. We appreciate it as long as we have it. And
right.
Somehow the work just keeps moving along, doesn't it?
It sure does. I was going to say, well, first of all, we both have two horrible football teams right now. Your Pittsburgh Steelers and my Cleveland Browns.
That was the last thing I expected.
That comes with the change in the season. For me, it always comes out with the Browns, with the poor Steelers. But on more pressing and important matters, you're right. A tremendous amount of activity happening per usual. I feel like a broken record on this podcast. But we're really starting to see the convergence of these programs we've been building, some of them for several months, if not a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll tell you, the response from the donor community has been at an all-time high.
Yeah, it's so gratifying, right? Whenever you see that we're putting forward programs that connect with our donor base, with our patient community. It's part of what puts wind in the sails to to keep going and doing all these things. And so grateful for everyone that puts trust in us with their precious dollars to advance our mission.
You must have read my report I recently sent to the board, and it was my cover letter I had to our board of trustees, was talking about a story of a donor who was given 3 times this quarter to UMDF, very generous gifts to UMDF. And we reached out just to better understand, what was driving this commitment. And his words were, I trust what you're doing and I like what you're doing. And boy, that's the kind of affinity we want to build as an organization, but it takes bringing programs to life.
True. Yeah, very true. It's one thing to brainstorm, ideate, vision analyses, these sorts of things, but actually building them, creating them, and then executing on them, right? And I think Brian, one of the most important aspects to me is that we build things in a way that they're sustainable.
Right.
We owe that to the community, that this isn't just sort of pop in, do things, get back out of there. So, but I think we're making real progress and a lot of exciting things still to come.
Yeah, something that caught my eye from an excitement standpoint. And I know you reported out at our mitochondrial medicine symposium about the initial success of our pilot genetic testing program. Right. But as that program really started to wrap up, and as we look into, to your point, sustainability of these programs, I thought it might be good just for our listeners just to get some high-level highlights from you on the genetic testing.
Quick reminder, right? So this was a pilot program. It was our very first sponsored no-cost genetic testing program. And what was really novel about this is that it was patient-focused. That is to say, we were directly engaging the patient community, right, to be able to collect information from them sufficient to use a machine learning algorithm, a partner, probably genetic, that we worked with, to compare their symptoms with known mitochondrial disease patients, and then make a determination if a given person is a good candidate to receive a genetic test. Mm-hmm. And we're just thrilled with the way the community responded to that. Right, we had 1,500 submissions in a matter of a month. We only had about 200 tests available, but the algorithm really helped provide a set of 200 from that we could offer the test to, and all the data that we've seen, right, whether it's how quickly the patient community responded to it, the number of clinicians, right, that they've been seeing, right? So, tremendous information for us to better understand who's taking care of the mitochondrial disease patients out there. But importantly, the results of the genetic testing.
Right.
And at a high level, what we saw is, out of those 200, roughly 2/3 of those patients had what are known as findings, right? So there was something in their genetics from that test that, indicated there was a genetic component to their disease. Not all mitochondrial disease, but
Right.
certainly a genetic disorder. And that was really important to us, that you can't be too fine with this and say, no, we just want to get the mitochondrial disease. We're really trying to advance patients on their diagnostic journey. It's so important to have a diagnosis, to have optimal clinical care, to be able to participate in clinical trials. So, all the data points in a really positive direction, in that we helped a really good number of patients to advance their diagnostic journey.
Easing that journey at a minimum, right?
Easing that,
Right.
journey, like knowing what your disease is, right? So,
Right.
so important. And, as we start to compare the effectiveness of this program with, say, more traditional programs or what else has been published, it looks really comparable, if not better in some aspects. So it gives us a lot of information and data to begin to think about, if we want to sustain this, right? If we want to continue to do this for the community, what's an even better way we could approach it? So I'm really excited about the results from that pilot.
Well, information is so key to advancing so many of these roadmap initiatives. Sure. And, we've joked about trying to come up with a really fun I Love My Data campaign at UMDF. And part of that's just in the spirit of how important that is to advancing research. And certainly what our listeners have been hearing us talk about, my gosh, for several months now, is our MitoShare patient registry. And I just saw some of the numbers today, and to see that we're getting pretty darn close to 1,000 participants in here. Now that's for a science and alliance officer like you, Phil, that has to be really exciting, who preaches a well-characterized patient registry is critical to advancing research.
Science and alliance officer, but just as an advocate, right? Yes, for this community I care so deeply about that. We've been sending this message of, we need an engaged patient community in order to advance our mission, particularly from a research perspective. And if the patient community is not willing to be engaged in activities like patient registries, we have a really hard time, right, with these larger programs. It's never for everybody, and there are good reasons why you may or may not at any given point in time want to participate. But we hope, right, that somewhere in your journey, you too feel compelled to share as much data as possible in an appropriate way, and know that we will steward that data and put it to maximum use, right, for research purposes. That's all we can ask, I think, from our patients and our caregivers. And the response, again, is really inspirational, right? That folks want to be involved in it. So it gets me really thinking about ways we can continue to make this registry more valuable. How do we make better use of the data? There's lots more to come. We're still in the early days, but the fact that we almost have 1,000 participants, express interest in being a part of an important initiative like that, great start.
It's a testament, certainly, to the motivation and leadership of our Mito community. This is really what our community looks like, to step up, constantly saying, what's next, right? What can we do now? And I think there's real engagement legs right now for MitoShare. A couple of new surveys are available, a head-to-toe assessment for our patient families who can go through that entire process, and then an opportunity to link some genomic data to your profile as well, too. So some exciting things on the forefront.
I think it really represents everything we said, right? You have to know where the patients are, and then have them well characterized. Of course, understand their demographics. So we have a broad sense of who's in the community, but the so-called genotype, right? The genetics associated with their disease, and the phenotype, the symptoms associated with their disease. That's what these surveys and the way we're structuring the registry is all about. And hopefully, in addition, they see it as a support tool as well, right? There are some really nice ways to track your doctor's appointments and medications that you're taking, and so on and so forth. It really has the opportunity, if they're interested, to be used in a way that it's as much a support tool as it is a research tool.
Well, that individual patient and caregiver is certainly the mouse in the house that Jack built, right? It's starting with that individual. And if you think about the house itself, The UMDF research program continues to be one that is growing exponentially, that we're proud of, and finding more creative ways to fund research as well too. And but just foreshadowing a little bit, the turn of the year, we head into January of 23. We'll soon to launch our traditional grant program. We're putting our RFPs out there, and I know it's always an exciting time for you.
It's like pumpkin spice season.
Yeah, you go for Phil. Yes, I love it.
It's great season.
Right? We like to see the research coming out. This is great.
People may not be knocking down our doors the same way as Starbucks, but same idea is that there's just seasons that we associate with certain aspects of our mission. So come the new year, we like to get our call out there for research proposals so that we can try and fund the best science that's taking place, and at the same time help to bring along that next generation of researchers, clinicians that are really going to advance our mission as well.
Well, another area that's really complementing the UMDF grants that we've sent out to our accelerator postdocs, our experienced investigators, our early stage investigators, are the projects that our family funds and our project funds have been raising money for over the years. Allows us to take a little bit more custom and bespoke approach to funding research. And one such project that's been really, at the forefront of raising a good amount of money, but not just money, awareness, is our LHON project fund, or Lebers Hereditary Optic Neuropathy Fund. Long time partnership with UMDF, and a brilliant job of galvanizing the community. And it's really centered around, talk about passionate volunteers. The LHON community is definitely a, hey, what's next? What do we do now community? And I'm excited for our conversation today. But before we dive in and bring our guest in, Phil, I thought it'd be good just to give a little bit of primer on LHON, because it is in fact Blindness Awareness Month right now in October.
Yeah, perfect timing, right? LHON is very much a mitochondrial disease, and it's part of the reason why we really prioritize this partnership with the LHON community, because for many of these patients, the principal phenotype symptom is blindness, right? Loss of vision. And so, many of those patients may, end up on a different track in terms of their diagnosis, and in clinics where mitochondrial disease might not be discussed, right? Other aspects of it. So, this importance of we are one, right, as a community in mitochondrial disease, but also recognize that this is a group of or a part of our patient community that have unique challenges, and understanding those and making them feel welcome, right, in the mitochondrial disease community, which we always say can affect young, old, male, female. Well, the same applies, right? It could be an ophthalmic condition, it could be a muscle condition, a neurological condition. And for far too many of our patients, some mix of all of those things. Right. So, LHON, maternally inherited, this is a disease that, again, principally affects vision. And, it's one where it's a bit of a two-edged sword, in that, terrible, right, to have the eyes affected, the vision affected like that. But at the same time, because it is the eye, it also affords some unique opportunities to treat the disease. And I think we'll be able to talk about some of that with our guest today too.
Excellent. Well, without further ado, it's a real honor to have a special guest in Blindness Awareness Month today. Our guest today is Miss Maria Johnson. She is a speaker, group fitness instructor, blogger. She calls herself a part-time podcaster. We might be full-time after today, Maria. Hails from San Diego, California, and is the self-dubbed Girl Gone Blind. We're going to get into that. But please welcome to the Powerhouse, Maria Johnson. Maria, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast today.
Great to have you here, Maria.
Well, we're delighted that you joined us. We want to get into all things Maria today. We want to talk a little about LHON and your journey, and how you have found your path in moving forward with LHON. But take us back a little bit. Let's just get to know Maria first. Tell us a bit about yourself, Maria.
Well, I live in San Diego, California. I'm a mom of two kids and a grandson.
All right.
Yep, 18-month-old grandson,
Nice.
and I do a lot of social media management. I'm a blogger. I'm a speaker, fitness instructor. Kind of still been on hold since COVID for that.
Mm.
Aspiring archer. Now,
Oh, okay.
there's
Tell
the
us
bomb.
about that.
All
Look,
right.
you've already detoured us. All right. Tell me about this. Let's get right into archery. Okay. Tell us about this.
Well, before I lost vision, and I guess I didn't really say that, yes, I'm affected, and I lost my vision to LHON in 2013.
Okay.
And before then, I had started dabbling in archery, and I absolutely loved it. It was like nothing that I'd ever done. I'm a fitness instructor, and I basically teach like high impact, hardcore stuff, boot
Right.
camp, and crazy. And archery was a whole nother level of zen, if you will. You
Yeah,
had
you
to
don't
be
want
very
hardcore
still.
archery, right? I imagine hardcore archery
No,
would be potentially dangerous.
it's not cardio archery.
Right. We might have
Yeah,
a new business
no,
though, but go on. Yeah. Tell me
yeah.
about this.
It's very frowned upon, I would
Right.
think, by the other archers who are next to you.
Right.
But yeah, so I really, really, really was enjoying it, and it's just the focus, the calm, and the competition within yourself
Mm.
of, I'll do better the next shot, the next shot, the next shot. Anyway, I, soon started to lose my vision, and fast forward, I went, well, that's over. That's not
Mm.
happening anymore, because that's what happens after you lose your vision. You think, I can't do anything. So about 8 months ago or so, my partner's like, you really loved archery.
Mm.
I really want to make this happen for you again. I'm like, okay, I don't know how, because I never really dug into it again. And sure enough, there is blind VI archery.
Mm.
And it's simply all in the shot, all in the setup of the bow, the arrow, the foot, the footings, and you don't need to see the target. It's again all in the setup and the shot. So there actually are many blind VI archers that go to Paralympics, that they have tournaments, indoor, outdoor. I've actually been to one lately to actually get a feel for it and see what it's really all about. I mean, you have to do it much differently than your fully sighted archers,
Right.
but they do it. And I actually, we contacted a world champion archer who we went and saw shoot with her partner. And no one tells you, go right, go left, up, down.
I was
It's
going to ask you
all
what the
in-house.
setup is like. Yeah. Well, sorry, I'm really curious now because that's what I'm really curious in the story of that moment too, to say like, no, you need to be doing this because this was a passion of yours. So what does that setup look like?
So, of course I was, very like, oh, are you sure? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can, because now, not having any central vision and my peripheral vision is very blurry. I can't really see even the details on the bow. I can't see the feathers on the arrow. So all those things come into play where it was just, I just did it before. Now it's all by feel. So it takes longer, all of those things. But basically the setup is you have like a metal placement on the ground where your heels go into. So each heel goes into a corner. And again, it's kind of, custom built for where your stance is, because then you're always standing in the right spot, the right place.
Right.
And then it's from there, it's just, your form on setting up the shot, getting the arrow in the bow, which takes practice when you can't see it. And again, I think that's one of my most frustrating parts, is because, it's all feel, and it's intricate, and put it in. And then just for practicing, my target is set up maybe, I don't know, maybe 20 feet, maybe away from me, just so I can work on form, strictly form, because that's really what's going to set you up for the shot and where it's going to go. So that's really most of what it's all about. Eventually, you do have a guide. It's a mechanical setup where you have on a tripod, it's kind of like a sight, but of course we don't use it, with almost like a little screw that comes out of it. So when I have my hand up, when the screw touches my hand in a certain place, I know I'm in the right position with my bow. And you get to know that, but again, you've got to get your shot right, and then you let it go. And that's pretty much the setup. I mean, people have said, I tell people that, they go, wait, you can't. And I said, no, I can't see the target. I really can't. And sure, have I shot arrows into my neighbor's yard? Maybe. Have I shot arrows into the fence? Maybe. And have I just nailed it? Maybe.
Yeah.
But it really is practice. And there, like I said, I've joined the U.S. Archery, Association. It's about getting, just like in many sports for the blind, you're categorized by your vision, totally blind, or just, a certain level of vision. So I still haven't done that yet. So it's been so hot here this summer. I haven't really been out there doing it. It's just, I don't do heat and humidity. It's just, that doesn't make it fun for me. So, I'm going to get back into it. And again, it's just practice. And literally that's as simple as it is. But some of the folks that we've come in contact with have been really said, we really need to get the blind VI archery, on the books. It's not quite as accepted by the main archery world. It's just like, yeah, you guys are over here. And like, no, we want to compete over here. So it's and we just need more blind archers to show, we're here and we want to do this. And especially there's not a lot of female blind archers. So I'm like, me.
There you go.
So yeah, so we'll see. So at the tournament we were at, it was just one woman blind archer, this gal that we've gotten to know. And so she was the only one competing. So she basically got first place. And I'm like, wait, so I could have gone up there and shot 2 arrows and got second, I think. But,
this is like my 9-year-old in the swim team. We're all sorts of ribbons, 2 guys.
yeah. So anyway, I mean, I know that's not the point of it.
No, I want to come back and just kind of talk about like how you started to navigate. I want to get into this more, finding the rediscovering some of the joys in life. But we need to go back first. Let's talk a little bit about this. So back in 2013, April of 13, you started to notice a blurry spot in your right eye.
Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me about that moment there. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. It's 9 years ago now. And it seems, I can go back to it, just going through those days of questioning, like, what's going on? And is it my contacts? Is it my glasses? Is there smudge? Because it's just like a little smudge. And is my windshield dirty on my car? I would stand in the mirror going like this, is it still there? I'd wake up every day. Is it still there? And I didn't tell anybody, I just kind of thought, that's just weird. It's just, I have something, something's in my eye. New contacts, dirty contact, I was coming up with every excuse except for there's something going on. So finally, I just was really starting to get worrisome. And I went to an optometrist, my local optometrist here. And he said, I just don't see anything with your actual eyeball, because optometrists are just trained to look at the eyeball. Right. He goes, it looks great, but I was having trouble seeing the eye chart with my right eye. Part of it was just gone because of this little blurry spot. So he said, you need to go to an ophthalmologist. So went to my ophthalmologist and did all of started doing all the tests that they do. And, whether, it's visual field tests where they check to where, you press the little button when you see the flashing light. And so every time you see a flashing light, you press the button. And if you don't see it, you don't press the button. So it actually can show where the spots are that you're not seeing anything. And so we did those tests. We did, shot dyes in my eyes to scan and take pictures of the optic nerves and all these things. And bottom line, he didn't know what was wrong. And he said to me, he goes, look at this pen. He goes, can you see it here? Can you see it here? And at times it would disappear with the one eye. And I finally said to him, I said, am I going blind? And I don't know what even made me say that. And he goes, and he just went, I don't know. And he goes, but you might. And I'm like, okay. And then he says, but I want to have you to have a brain scan because you might have a brain tumor. And everyone who is going through the diagnosis journey gets that. We might have a brain tumor. Yeah. So I was there by myself. I drove home crying the whole way going, oh my God, like what is happening? So I did the scan and thankfully there was no brain tumor. There was nothing wrong there. And I was just still wanting answers. So I went back to the ophthalmologist and for a follow-up to see the progression or what was happening. And he said, I just don't think there's anything else I can do for you. You're going to have to see a neuro-ophthalmologist. But, that might take some time to see him. And I thought, well, how long do you think it'll take? Because now I was really getting worried. And this was by this point, it was, this was August. So April to August, I've been just going through the motions. And he said, I don't really know. And I said, okay, well, can you put in the referral? Because I guess that's what I got to do. Meanwhile, I was really, really getting concerned. And my mom was like, we got to figure this out. So I actually called up Shiley Eye Center, which is connected to UCSD here, and said, can I get in to see a neuro-ophthalmologist there? And I was able to get in to see one there very quickly, get all my records over there. So going into this new place, having him look in my eyes, the whole thing, I heard the words MS. I heard the words optic, neuropathy, optic neuritis. I heard all of the things that, we all hear. Yeah. And meanwhile, one by one, fellows were coming into the room and saying, would you mind if they looked in your eyes? They looked in their eyes. And they were, looking back into the optic nerve. And he said, after all that was done, and I, was just the parade of fellows walked out and he sat and talked to me and he said, I think I might know what's going on. He goes, but you're with Kaiser Permanente, which is the healthcare down here. And I said, yes. And he goes, Kenneth Kubis, is he the doctor you're going to see? I go, yeah, but I can't get in for like 6 weeks. He goes, hold on. I'm not kidding you. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out his cell phone, dials up, hey, Ken. Calls my neuro-ophthalmologist and says, yeah, he goes, I have a patient of yours and you need to see her yesterday. I'm going to write up all these notes and I need your office to call her today to get her in. Wow. And I'm like, oh, that's cool that you just did that. But now it sounds serious. Wow. And I didn't know what MS meant at the time. I just heard, I was just kind of in a blur, no pun intended at this point. So sure enough, I got a call that day and I was getting in like 4 days. So I went in and so now we're in September and I found, and this doctor was just on it. He goes, I'm going to figure out what's going on with your vision and, see what we can do to save your vision. Cause I'm thinking this whole time, they're going to give me medication. They're going to, do whatever the procedure is, surgery. It's not going to be a big deal at all. I really just didn't feel it's going to be a big deal. Meanwhile, I'm still teaching group fitness. I have 2 kids at home. I'm still volunteering. I'm still driving. Meanwhile, through the biggest 50th birthday party of the year for myself in August. And I did I did everything for it. And I'll tell you, people kept saying like, you're having such a big party. And there was something in me that just told me like, make it big. Make it big, because truly that is the last real true visual memory I had of my friends and family was that party. And they all looked amazing. And I said, you look like you did when you were 50, you know, and because that's when I last could see their faces.
Right.
Because very soon after that party, which was mid-August, we're sliding into September. I'm seeing now a neuro-ophthalmologist. He looks in my eyes. I'd done a visual field and he says, you know, it's happening in your other eye now, don't you? And I said, yes, but I didn't want to say it out loud. And sure enough, another blurry spot was starting in the other eye. And I said, what's happening? He goes, we're going to find out. But this doctor knew, put me through all the tests again, most of them. But he knew to do a genetic test. He was a doctor, a neuro-ophthalmologist in the military, in the Navy for years. So he had seen LHON in young men, but he had never diagnosed a woman. And then here I am, an older, you know, female. And he said, I don't think it's that, but I'm not ruling anything out. And so he went, right away. We did the blood work for it. And that was for the beginning of September. And by the September 24th, I got the call. So it was very quick. And it showed that I was positive for LHON 11778. And he called me and he said, you know, we have your results. Meanwhile, I'm on steroid treatments. I'm told to stop teaching fitness, stop eating any crazy protein shakes I was doing, because he's like, we don't know what's causing this. And stop taking any medication I don't have to take. And he said, he called me, we have the answer. And he told me, and he said, it's Lebers Hereditary Optic Neuropathy. And I was like, love it, what? And, you know, because he had never really said what it was. He just said, I'm testing you for this, this genetic thing. Never really went into it. So I was like, okay. And he said, I know you have children. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, he goes, I want you to, with the beauty of the internet, he goes, I want you to look into this. And he goes, and I'll call you in a couple of days. And he goes, I'm really, really sorry you have this, but I'm glad we have the answer now. And I was like, oh, okay. And I hung up the phone kind of in shock, but kind of thought, we have the answer, but now what?
Right.
I had no idea I'd passed it to my children at this point. I had no idea that, you know, I was going to have to make that call to my sister. I had no idea I would have to tell my mother that this whole time it was something that was maternally, you know, down the bloodline to me from her. And so we started reading about it and finding out all the things that entails, you know, LHON, and that I was going to be legally blind. There's no treatment, no cure. And I was the first one that we know of in the family to express, you know, blindness due to mitochondrial disease. So I actually ended up going out that night because I was going out with my girlfriends, and I still went because, I mean, that's how in shock I think I was.
Right.
And I was telling my good girlfriends, I'm like, well, I have a diagnosis. And they're like, what does this mean? And I go, I don't know what it means. And I literally was just detached myself from it. So slowly it hit. Slowly I had to make that call to my sister. And then to explain to her that, you know, she's passed it to her two boys. My sister and I sat down with our mom and told her, and she was like, well, doesn't it skip a generation? How do you know it's from me? And it wasn't a blame thing. It was just explaining this whole time, but no mom. No mom wants to hear that I've done, you know, I've passed this. Right. And, you know, it's fine, Mom. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. The hardest thing was telling my kids. And my daughter had just turned 13 going into high school. Great time to have your mom go blind. Let's just say. Great time. My son was 19 and had just started college. And so to tell them was very different ways. But my son had overheard me on the phone with my doctor when he called me with the diagnosis. And so my son actually approached me and said, Mom, what's LHON? And I'm like, oh, like, I'm not prepared, not prepared, not prepared. Because in my mind at that point, I was sure my kids were going blind like tomorrow. Like they're going to go blind tomorrow. And so we had the conversation, very emotional. And he said, Mom, I know it's not your fault. I know it's not your fault. But I still couldn't, I was just so worried, like sick, that he literally was going to go blind the next day. And then my daughter was a completely different conversation at her age. I don't even think I told her for a while, but I did. And then, but I was going to wait to tell her about her passing it. And then funny story, we were with some other LHON families, and this other mom started blabbing about how she passed it to her daughter, and then her daughter's going to pass it to her kids. And my daughter was maybe 14 at the time. I just didn't feel it was something she needed to know at that moment. She started putting the pieces together and figured it out by this other family talking about it. So it didn't come from me. It came from someone else. Right. And she immediately gets home crying, I'm never having children. I'm not having any kids. But again, 14, and why didn't you tell me? And, how do you explain? I don't know.
And the mind just had to be racing constantly. During this time.
Racing.
And Phil, I think a lot about how this, Maria's story here is I've heard this story many, many times in the LHON community, in the MITO community. We just talked at the beginning of the show about the diagnostic journey and going from doctor to another doctor to a specialist, and then hearing that and the mind racing. And I think a lot about our responsibility as patient advocacy groups is to soften that landing a little bit. But Phil, I know this is something we hear constantly.
Oh, for sure. I mean, so many aspects of Maria's story, just encapsulate the diagnostic journey for mitochondrial disease, and often it involves healthcare providers that are uninformed, misinformed, perhaps don't have the best bedside manner to be able to to share this kind of information. That may not have been even your experience, Maria, but so many we hear this, and it's raw, and to have this aspect with the maternal inheritance and affecting the children. It's certainly a lot to have moved onto your plate in a very short amount of time.
Yes, fully sighted to legally blind in 8 months. Life, it was like I was doing all the things, mom, volunteer, working, and then boom, you just go, whoa. And once, we kind of, now the family all knew about it, then it was just, okay, how am I going to carry on to be the mom I want to be, to do all the things I want to do? I had to give up my keys to the car. Never, I won't forget that day, anytime ever. I had to start learning to do things differently. But what killed me was the things that I couldn't do for my kids. Couldn't drive them places, couldn't help them with their homework, couldn't, get them to their dentist appointment. I mean, just the little things you don't really think about from day to day. And somebody, I've had people say like, oh gosh, I know what it's like. I didn't have my car yesterday. It was in the shop. Couldn't go anywhere. I'm all, okay. Try throwing your keys out for like a month. And then tell me how it feels that you can't get your kids places, you can't meet them places, you can't just run up here, run up there. And I was that mom. I took care of the household. I took care of all my kids' stuff. And I, of course, was still teaching group fitness classes. And I continued to teach group fitness classes. I'll tell you, I was so motivated to not let LHON take that away from me. I had been doing it for, 16 years at that point, and I never missed the class unless my doctor told me you're on steroids, you can't do it right now. I never missed a class. And that day that I knew I wasn't going to be able to drive to the gym, the different locations anymore, and I kind of consolidated. I knew that it was just not realistic to be teaching all over town. And I said to my students, I said, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to teach classes because I can't get to the gym. And at that time, Uber was super new and I wasn't going to taxi or anything. Within 10 minutes, I had someone offer to take me and pick me up to every class I taught at that gym.
Found a way.
And the members just said, you do so much for us here. We're going to get you here.
Wow.
And I was so overwhelmed. I mean, I just thought, why? And I thought, why not? I would do it for them. But when you're in those shoes, you're like, yeah. But that's me to you, not you to me. And I was also running a boot camp with a friend. We had a business, and I finally, she had to start picking me up for everything. And we would sit in the car, and she said, this is just now an extension of our friendship. And I said, but it's such a burden now. She goes, no, it's not. It's just now a part of our friendship.
Yeah, I was going to ask that as a follow-up. Are there things that you feel like you're doing better than ever post-diagnosis? Because clearly you have brought a very, it seems to me in this conversation, a very instant positive outlook and found a way. What are some of the things in your life that you feel like you're doing better post-diagnosis? If that's a fair way of asking that.
Well, I'll tell you, just so I can, people can understand and relate. I wasn't like this in the beginning. Yeah. I honest to God didn't think I'd make it through the first year. I was really depressed. I was distraught. I was devastated. I thought, this isn't how life is supposed to go. I just turned 50. I was fit. I was ready for the next chapter. And I thought, wow, and this happens. And I struggled. I struggled a lot. And honestly, I've been very open about this. I did think about, like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I can't do it. How am I going to check out? Yeah. What's the best way? Because I wasn't going to do it. And I just couldn't see how life could even be worth anything now that I was blind, because I didn't know any blind people. So I didn't know how blind people did anything. I was clueless, like many people are. Plus, you think blind people just don't see anything. And they're portrayed in movies, whacking their cane around, big glasses, unsightly clothes, and, just kind of wacky, and I'm like, I'm not like that, but I'm gonna be like that because that's a blind person. So but as one of the quotes I said that we talked about, prior to the podcast was, I just kept showing up. And I showed up to the swim meets. I showed up to the band tournaments. I showed up to teach group fitness. I learned the things I had to do to give myself the independence I so desperately wanted back. And learning, again, assistive technology, voiceover on the iPhone and iPad. It was super frustrating. It was old dog learning new tricks. Right. And I was really angry that I had to relearn how to use my cell phone a completely different way. And it was, there were times I thought, I can't do it. I just can't do it. But my devastation was my motivation to get back out and be in the world again. I had an amazing support group of friends because I'd been in the same community for years. I wanted to still do all the things, and people were willing to help me do it. But I also had to be willing to do it, to ask for help, and learn the new tools, tricks, tips, and the skills to be independent again. And accept the things that I just was never going to be able to do again, which was like drive, not going to be able to do that again. So, once you get past a lot of that and come to kind of acknowledge, and I'm not going to say accept 100% because sometimes you just never do, all of those things, then you move forward and then you start to go, I had a moment where I said, I'm not going to beat this. I might as well join this.
But it was this kind of 1% better each day in terms of taking that 1% better. Yeah. Tell me about that a little bit more. I want to understand like what your support network. You mentioned the great story about the members of the gym rallying behind you, and I imagine as you're navigating this, and I appreciate your honesty around being depressed around this and navigating that from a mental health standpoint. Talk to us a little bit about what that support network looks like for you and some of the influences in your life that helps ease that journey.
Well, I'm very, very lucky. Many people don't have the support or friends or, they're in a small town and there's just not the services they might need. I'll tell you, after we found out about this diagnosis, of course, where's the one place you go is the internet. And
Right.
then you find yourself on Facebook. And then you find yourself on hey, there's a Lebers Hereditary Optic Neuropathy page. Look at this. So we were on that and we saw like, wow, there's this lady that knows everything.
Yeah, she's been a guest on
And
this Powerhouse too.
yes. And so back in 2013, we're like, well, this gal, Alyssa Pointsnow, she seems to be, she's got she knows everything. And look, she lives in the San Diego area. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to get in touch with her.
Right.
So we did. And that was my very first contact, as she is for many, 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 many families of, oh my gosh, tell me what's just happened to our family. And I had a very long conversation with her on the phone, and I could still see pretty well to read notes, and I'm writing, okay, Dr. Sadoun, okay, this and that. And all the things that she's telling me, like, these are things you're going to want to keep in mind going forward. And I'm like, yeah. Like, I'm not going to be the typical, I'm still going to be able to see out of one eye, so I'm going to be fine. And I'm going to be able to drive, unlike the rest of the people, because that's just how I was thinking. It wasn't going to be a big deal. So I got off the phone with her and she said, I have a feeling we'll be talking more in the future. And I'm like, oh, okay, right. So I threw those notes aside and thought, okay, well, I'm just going to move on with my regular life. So she was my first contact of support. And little did I know she was right on everything she told me. And I went down the exact path she said. And we, again, now, to today, we are very, very good friends. We have worked very closely together on many projects and the conference, of course. So she was my first line of support. And then it became family and friends, and the rides that I needed, the people who were willing to pick me up and take me places. But not only that, pick up my daughter and take her where she needed to go, because it's that extension of, well, it's not just me that needs help. All the things I was doing before, runs to the grocery store, things like that. And so my girlfriends, who I've known for years, I have been able to rely on them, no matter what. Nowadays, I don't even have to ask for rides. It's just part of the deal. Someone always says, I'll pick up Maria. I don't even have to ask anymore. And it is so hard to ask for help. And that was a big struggle for me as well. It was so hard. I would literally have a phone knowing I had to ask for a favor, if you will. And I would sit there with such anxiety, crying, because I couldn't do it, because I thought, who's going to want to help me? But the truth was, everybody wanted to help, because it's a gift they can give me, but they're giving the gift to themselves of being able to help me. And by me denying anybody's gift of help was taking that gift away from them. And when I realized that me saying, no, it's fine, no, that's okay, I'm good, they wanted to help me. And I just took that away from them. And that was a real weird way for me to.
Perspective. It really is. When you think about, especially, gosh, Phil, talk about stories ringing true. Miss Lissa Ponsono, guest of this podcast, and a longtime friend of UMDF, who has really been a stalwart in the LHON community, right? In some respects, a matriarch of providing help. And Phil, I know you've had the real pleasure of connecting with Lissa, and talk about a central resource for this community.
Yeah, she was my first resource, right? When I came into this community and in this role, unaware, ignorant to LHON and the ophthalmic disorders, and so patient to describe it, to help me understand, where there were similarities, but where there were clearly differences too, and. We're very fortunate to have someone like Lissa in our community that gives so generously of her time, her knowledge, and these kinds of stories are been reproduced thousands times over. Right? It's just sometimes incomprehensible, right? To kind of think about the number of people that she's had an impact on, in doing it. And for Maria, it's story is just such an inspiration, right? How to you take on a new chapter of life, and this burden that was unexpected, and to chip away at it, and acknowledge that it's not immediate, that it's all going to be okay, but that you have to keep working at it. And I hope others in our community can take some comfort in that, and are inspired, right, to help chart their own journey with mitochondrial disease. It's so challenging, and no two journeys are the same, but there are a lot of great best practices and lessons, right, and what you just described as to how to handle a situation like this.
Well, exactly. And I think it's important for people to know that not everyone gets their diagnosis and walks out of their doctor's office with a white cane or a guide dog and is like, yeah, this is cool. No, it does not happen.
Right.
And if anyone says, yeah, I just kind of went on my merry way, I never really thought too much about it, I'm like, yeah, then you're stuffing it down with Oreos at night. So, you have to go through the emotions, and you have to go through the storms. I pushed the storms away time and time again, and that wasn't good for me mentally. And so when those feelings and the floods of emotions in the early years would come up, because I was either frustrated with having to do something differently, something took 5 times longer than normal, finding, the bread in the refrigerator took 2 minutes instead of 2 seconds. Those moments would kind of take you down for a second, think, it's not how I used to do it. And then finally you just go, but when you go, that's just the way it is, you kind of breathe again and continue on. And it's not easy. And I tell people who I speak to, because I speak to a lot of people first when they're just newly diagnosed, or maybe a little ways in and they have never spoken to anybody with LHON. And for them to find a connection with someone who gets it, understands what they're going through, and I can tell them, like, that's totally normal. What you just said, that's normal. We get it. I get it. And you're going to be okay. But it takes time, because so many people say, come on, get over it. You know what? Move on. Move on. No.
So you've brought that perspective now as an advocate. At some point, you decided also that I'm going to find ways to help advocate for this. And we're certainly planning for the meetings and girlgoneblind.com and some of these other places. So talk to me about that transition into an advocate and a supporter for other families on this journey.
Yes, I absolutely love supporting others in their journey, whether they're just newly diagnosed, as I said, or they've been diagnosed for years but have never talked to anyone else with LHON, because we find those people too. And I had someone support, I had those really, really great support calls early on from folks in the community who reached out and said, I can talk. I understand. I get it. Me too. You're not alone. And I really have just from that point going, I truly believe in paying that back and paying that forward, because it was so valuable to me, talked me off the ledge many times. I talked to a mom in the very beginning. I said, I need to talk to a mom, like a mom, no one else, a mom.
Right.
Because since this, as you guys spoke about in the beginning, LHON can hit at any age, at any time, doesn't know gender, nationality, country, nothing. But I needed someone who was in my shoes, and in the beginning. And that really was the first call that really just made me feel like I'm not alone. And no one should feel alone in this. I don't care, what it could be any disease, really, right? No one should feel alone. And the one great thing about the LHON community is that we are really kind of a tight community. We really are. And this being a hereditary condition, it's not only, ourselves who are affected, but you also are carriers. So, carriers have to be on, they're at risk. Now our children I have to be, I'm always thinking about my children, not all the time. I don't think like I did in the beginning, but now my daughter, who said she would never have kids, has the most adorable grandson, son.
Yeah.
And, but have I thought about, gosh, what if? Yes, I have, because that's just normal. But until then, you know what? We're going to just enjoy.
Yeah.
Now, my advocacy for myself, be it my doctor's appointments, being out in the world, my daughter's watched me, my son too. My daughter's watched me, and now she has had to advocate for herself and her son.
Mm-hmm.
And that has not been an easy journey, because they look at her as a 22-year-old, what do you know? And there's doctors that have told her she is wrong, that I must be misdiagnosed because women don't get LHON. They told her, they tried to say her son didn't have it because, the chromosomes don't work that way.
Yeah. Uninformed, misinformed, right?
Oh my God. And my daughter, yes. So my daughter got a real quick lesson, not only while she was pregnant, because she got COVID, she's in the hospital, she's like, saying all these things, she ended up having to take the antiviral, because she wasn't going to get better unless she had the antiviral. So, but she's telling him all the things that are in her chart, and they're like, why is this here? Well, I have a mitochondrial disease. Well, then why are all these, medications you can't have? And she's trying to explain, and she's sick. I mean, it was brutal. And then even when she was in labor, I'm telling we can't have lactated ringer, and we, these things, why are all these in your chart? And I'm trying to explain. And luckily I was in there, because then I became mama bear, and, nobody wants that.
No.
Nobody wants a mama bear, right?
But we need mama bears. Yes.
We need mama bears. Yes. And so now she's had to be in, now her pediatrician sent her to a pediatric, ophthalmologist. And that's the guy who said, well, you're talking about chromosomal. He said he doesn't have it, because chromosomal DNA doesn't work that way. He'd have to have X and Y's. And she called me. This was heartbreaking. She called me after that appointment and said, Mom, I think there's a chance Kane, my grandson, I think there's a chance he doesn't have it.
Oh.
I go, honey, what are you talking about? And she told me. I was furious. And I had to tell her, no, honey, that's chromosomal DNA. This is mitochondrial DNA. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So what did I do? Mama bear. I messaged my neuro-ophthalmologist, who's amazing here in San Diego. He has been the most amazing doctor, bedside manner, like no one I've ever had before. He's one of GGB's #1 fans. Wants me to write a book. He's always there for me. He's been there for my kids, and always will be for our family. And I called him and I said, you are not going to believe what just happened to my daughter. And boom, if he quickly called my daughter, explained, this doctor wasn't right, called the other doctor, said some maybe magic, beautiful words, and straightened that doctor out. Whereas that doctor then called my daughter to apologize.
Wow. Shout out to your doctor. That's incredible.
Right?
Yeah. And
said, I'm so sorry. And basically, I think a lot of it was discounting because she's young.
Yeah.
What does she know? What does she know? Again, so that was a lesson for me to tell my daughter, do you see why Alyssa does what she does? Do you see why we all do what we do?
Yes.
And do you see why advocacy and advocating is so important? No matter what people say to you, you have to stand up for yourself, because you were right. You were right.
I was just going to ask you to wrap our conversation by giving a really strong piece of advice for folks who may be getting on this journey. And I think you really summed it up there, right? This is about speaking up for yourself, advocating for yourself, making yourself informed. And to quote you, Maria, always showing up each and every single day, right? And I know I was inspired by that when I saw that on the blog, that's the day you give up, when you don't show up. And clearly from our conversation today, you show up every single day. And Phil, I think about just thematically what we're hearing today. Unfortunately, these are themes that we hear a lot in our community. We think about
and
educating
of course extends beyond mitochondrial disease, but
sure.
we tend to put doctors on pedestals, right?
Right.
And you just expect that they know, but it's, there's 7,000 plus rare diseases,
Yeah.
The difference between nuclear DNA and mitochondrial DNA. Yeah, they had undergrad biology and probably one lecture in medical school, right?
Right.
And then the real world comes, and they don't see patients like this very often at all, and uninformed or misinformed, so often. So, boy, Maria's take-home message there, like, you have to be an advocate for yourself.
That's right.
And doesn't seem fair, but who should know it better, right, than you who are affected, or you have family members affected, and having the patience to bring them down off that pedestal, out of the tower, right, and explain it to them in a way that they don't feel insulted by it. It's not easy, and we hear this all the time.
Right.
What I also love hearing, though, is doctors who pull out cell phones and call other doctors, and doctors who call daughters and say, "Hey, here's how it is." Right? It's that's what's complementary to all of this, and I think part of it is just that's part of showing up too, right? So shout out to our community who is out there advocating for our patients. And Maria, I will ask you: is there anything else that you'd like to be able to share with the community that we haven't had a chance to cover today?
Well, I really believe getting involved in the community is super important for, support, and for information and knowledge. And, I was just speaking to someone the other day who this person is affected, can't use his cell phone. I can't be on Zoom calls because he doesn't know how to do all of that. And he so desperately would benefit from being in the community for support. And, in our LHON community, we have Zoom calls going all the time. And, of course, always stuff going on in the global group, our main group with over 5,000 members. And, that's where you can really, really find a lot of good information as well. Granted, it's Facebook, you have to kind of cipher through it, and there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But to feel a part of the community again, so that you don't feel alone, I think is half the battle. Because when you're out there just kind of floating, feeling a little bit lost, us, in the UMDF and as an LHON community, we'll pull your rope in, come on, come back in. You can sit with us. You're not alone. And we've had people time and time again on our monthly Zoom calls that we do just for the whole global community, whoever wants to join, have come on, and literally it's been life-changing for them to know that there are people there to support them. So getting involved, whether it's just sitting on Zoom calls or getting on in the groups, I think can be really, really valuable. And you can do that from anywhere. You don't have to be in person. You can do it from anywhere. So no excuse that I live in a small town, I can't drive. Doesn't matter. You can use your phone, your tablet, your computer. And I, of course, have gone to the extreme. Now, I've been involved in the conference since 2014. I've been involved every year. And last year, for the first time, co-chaired. And next year, I am actually leading the whole conference with my trusty sidekick, Jessica Loomer. But I'm pretty much heading up the thing, which is, I am so passionate about our conference. And that's the other thing is, anyone in the LHON community, and of course anyone's invited, families, carriers, all of that, loved ones, is that such an amazing event along with the UMDF symposium to attend if anyone can. It's, again, I said life-changing already, but it is life-changing to meet people that are just like you, be a carrier or an affected, because carriers need support too. Husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, sons, daughters, cousins, aunts, whatever it is. But it's a place to go where you really do meet and immerse yourself into the community, and you leave the conference feeling like, you know what? I've got another family.
Right. Sometimes you just need that hug. Family. You need that in-person hug and that connection.
Yes.
So our community who may be listening in that may not be aware of all these resources, which would be hard to believe because the LHON community does such a great job advocating and promoting the programs. But certainly check out umdf.org, where you can learn more about the Mitochondrial Medicine Symposium, where we have the LHON track alongside with that. I call it a track, it's a full meeting. Of course, the support groups can be found on umdf.org too. You can check out our calendar place there. There's no shortage of resources, right? And it's because there are volunteers who've stepped up. Like in our conversation here, Maria, we see the growth of your journey as an advocate, right? Those moments of, I don't know if I can go to another day, to co-chairing and chairing and running these programs. So shout out to you, right? That takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of strength to do that. I hope it didn't take too much strength to join Phil and I for this podcast, and I hope we made it relatively conversational and easy on you. I know as I say this, after all these episodes we have, we leave extremely inspired, talking to the real boots on the ground here, right? When I say boots on the ground, it's not just as an affected patient, but it's boots on the ground of, all right, what next? Let's kick down this door. And now I have this challenge. Now what are we going to do? Count yourself in a very elite company, and one that we're very fortunate to have, Maria.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I so enjoyed this. I know I could go for hours.
Well, we'll do an extended version someday, right?
Part two.
Live
Part
at the
two.
symposium. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, and I want to mention, LHON.org is the LHON website. And if you haven't, we do have a large global group on Facebook. You just search out Lebers Hereditary Optic Neuropathy global group on Facebook. Join. You're one of many. If you're just catching this and you don't know about the largest group we have, and then all the groups that trickle down from there. But also you can find my blog.
I was going to ask you to plug it, so I'm glad you're going. What do we tell us
out
where
the
to
blog
find you?
that I started in 2014, thinking maybe I'll do this. Sure, I can't see the computer or keyboard, so let's write a blog, because that's a good idea. So, but I did, and as we talked about, I touched in the beginning, things were dark for me, and I wrote that way. I wrote a lot about that. And so people who are just in their beginning of their journey can go to those early ones and go, wow, I feel like this, but also can move along and see how the blog has kind of matured. And, then it gets to the point of where I can actually educate, and because I know more, I'm doing more and things of that sort. And it's been a little dormant for over COVID. I just had a lot of life's things going on. Grandson was born,
right.
Those things, life gets in the way. But I could write a ton about being a grandmother and babysitting my grandson, and, being a blind grandma. Yeah. People make those comments too. Like, how do you do that? Well,
you have to squeeze in an entry before the podcast goes live, right? Then it'll feel very fresh.
I'll do something. And then, exactly. And then, anyway, so that's girlgoneblind.com. So, and that's, it's 150 plus blogs there. So check that out. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well under Girl Gone Blind.
Awesome. Well, Maria, it's been a real pleasure being with you here today.
Thank you so much.
Sharing your story and your charge as an advocate for the LHON community. And we wish you best of luck as you continue to champion this cause.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here today. Thanks again.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Maria. Well, Phil, I was so many like sinking feelings, right? When you hear the stories of, and of course this happens in just about every disease community, that sinking feeling of not knowing and then knowing, and then understanding your life is flipped upside down.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so interesting, right? The way the human brain has evolved, right? Like we have this deep-seated need to know how we're part of a group, of a community, but also how we're unique, right? And that is so deeply, right, embedded, and it includes how we think about things like this, that, I'm part of a mitochondrial disease or even LHON keto community, but, there's me, right? It's me, who I am. And Maria is so effective at articulating that and sharing, right, her journey along that I know I'm inspired by it. And I really hope that others, I'm certain others, I should really rephrase that. I'm certain many others have likewise been inspired by what she's done. Continue.
Yeah, a lot of themes of strength here, and you know, I'm always giving you unsolicited book recommendations. We just talked this week earlier about the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. I give it on here as well too. And I think about Maria's story, the LHON community as a whole. They're a gritty bunch, right? Like, because that's what it takes. It's over and over and over again, finding ways, right? And shout out to Maria, honestly, a true grit paragon.
Very much.
Well, another great episode. Thanks again to our special guest, Maria Johnson. Check out girlgoneblind.org. Of course, UMDF.com. Oh my gosh. I'm so used to rattling off UMDF.org at the end of here. This is why I have a co-host, a really smart one at that. Good. Thank you, Phil. Girlgoneblind.com. We'll put in the show notes as well, too. UMDF.org is where you can find many of the resources that Maria mentioned. So the annual meeting that we have with the LHON community, our Zoom program as well, Zoom events as well too, and of course the LHON group can be found on UMDF as well too. So check that out. Until next time, everybody, go fast.